today. My name is Samantha Barnaby. I am the Assistant Director on the Planning Team of CARES. Today, I will provide a brief overview of the fiscal year 22 Continuum of Care Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, New Project Opportunities. This webinar training was developed specifically for CoC membership, board members, and community stakeholders who may be interested in applying for available new funds this year. Next slide, please. A couple of housekeeping items. Before we begin, I ask that attendees please keep themselves muted through the presentation, as we have a lot of time for Q&A at the end. As we are going through the presentation, please use the chat box at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. Please be sure you have selected to send the question to everyone and not specific individuals. CARES staff will be discussing all submitted questions during the Q&A following the presentation. Next slide, please. Please identify yourself in the chat and name your Zoom box. In the chat, please state your name, organization, preferred pronouns, and your CoC. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the CARES website under the NOFO page in the coming days. An FAQ document on new project opportunities will also be posted to our website. CARES developed this webinar because we believe it is our responsibility as collaborative applicant to provide clear and concise information on the CoC NOFO to the full community to ensure the CoC process is community-centered and transparent. Please note, this session is about how to apply for new projects under the annual CoC application, not the supplemental NOFO. Next slide, please. So what are our goals for today? Today's presentation provides a summary of new project opportunities available in the fiscal year 2022 CoC NOFO application. Specifically, the presentation will briefly review what a continuum of care, or CoC, is and the CoC application. We will summarize CoC bonus and reallocated funding opportunities, summarize DV bonus opportunities. For each new funding opportunity, we will review who is eligible to apply, what project types are eligible, and how HUD will score new project applications. We will also review expansion grants, steps for submission and deadlines, and then answer any questions in the Q&A. Next slide, please. So let's begin. What is a CoC? Before detailing what can be applied for this year, it is important to have a clear understanding of the Continuum of Care program and its goals. The Continuum of Care, or CoC program, is a funding stream out of HUD designed to promote a community-wide commitment to the goal of ending homelessness. The program provides funding to nonprofits, states, local governments, and tribes and tribally designated housing entities to quickly rehouse homeless households while minimizing trauma and dislocation caused by homelessness. To that end, the CoC program mostly funds housing assistance and support services for the most vulnerable persons experiencing homelessness, with the goal of providing housing and services for those persons who would struggle to remain successfully housed without ongoing case management. On the local level, the CoC is the body of stakeholders who work collaboratively to implement the CoC program and to efficiently and effectively solve homelessness. Next slide, please. You will hear this.
I'm so sorry to pause you, but I was kicked off momentarily. What number slide are you on?
Oh goodness, I believe. Move forward one.
So sorry about that, folks.
Next slide. Okay, that's where we are. Sorry about that. Okay, so sorry about that, folks. I will do that again. Okay, so this is what is a CoC continued? So you will hear the term CoC referred to as a funding stream through HUD that provides agencies with funding to operate supportive services, transitional housing, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing to reduce homelessness. A group of stakeholders in a given region who work collaboratively on a year-round basis to address homelessness. Annually, the CoC submits the CoC application to HUD to apply for CoC funding. Okay, next slide, Jen. What is the application process? The CoC consolidated application is all within HUD's electronic systems eSnaps. The collaborative applicant is responsible for submitting the application. The CoC application is one part of the consolidated application. It contains information about the CoC planning body, governance, overall performance, and the strategic planning process. HUD scores the CoC application to determine the order of funding by CoCs nationwide. The priority listing is the second piece of the consolidated application and contains project applications completed by grantees and then placed in rank order using the local CoC rank and review process. It is within the priority listing that new and DV bonus applications will be submitted. Next slide, please. What is a new project application? CoC project applications fall into two general categories: renewal applications and new project applications. As their name suggests, renewal applications are submitted annually by agencies currently receiving CoC funding to support existing projects, most of which provide housing to persons who have experienced homelessness. New project applications propose to use CoC bonus reallocation and DV funding to provide additional units, services, etc. Next slide, Jen. Okay, so forms and funding. New project applications are funded through CoC bonus, reallocation, and DV bonus funding. New project applications may be submitted as a new project, an expansion grant, or a transition grant. I will go into more detail about these funding sources and project forms as we continue the presentation. Next slide. How much funding is available? For CoC bonus projects, HUD allows CoCs to apply for up to 5% of the CoC's final pro rata need, which is a calculation of the total amount of funds the CoC receives. Reallocation funding becomes available when a CoC opts to shift funds from an existing eligible renewal project to create one or more new projects. DV bonus projects, HUD has appropriated at least 52 million for DV bonus projects this year. Each CoC has been provided a designated amount. We will go over the CoC amounts in a few moments. Next slide, please. Reallocation. Reallocation is a process CoCs use to shift funds in whole or in part from existing eligible renewal projects to create one or more new projects without decreasing the CoC's annual renewal demand. Reallocation may be considered if a project is underperforming or regularly returning money to HUD that could otherwise be utilized in the community by another project. Likewise, a project may no longer be meeting a current community need. If reallocation funds become available for the membership, we will reach out via email. Next slide. This slide shows the estimated new funding that is available in each CoC for CoC bonus and DV bonus projects this year. These are also available per your respective CoCs on the NOFA page of the CARES website under CoC public postings. CARES will update the amounts once HUD finalizes the GIWs if there are any changes. We are not expecting changes, but if there are, we will update them there. And next slide, please. Rank and review and eSnaps. Okay, so new and DV projects are submitted as a two-part process. First, applicants must fill out and submit the new DV project application for scoring. Each CoC has a review team that was selected to score applications. Scoring results will determine which project will be submitted as part of the CoC's consolidated application. This is called the rank and review process and is a HUD mandated part of the CoC application. This process prioritizes projects for funding based on the most significant local need, HUD priorities, and agency experience and capacity. Secondly, applicants will need to submit their projects into the HUD system known as eSnaps. We will review next steps for each of these applications at the end of this presentation. Please note, only those new projects that score high enough on the local CoC rank and review process will move forward with the CoC application for funding. HUD will then score your project, which is submitted in eSnaps, as part of the national competition. Being accepted by the local rank and review process is not an indication of being awarded funding through HUD. Next slide, please. So who is eligible to apply for new projects? Any nonprofit organization, state, Indian, tribe, or tribally designated housing entity, or local government, or instrumentalities of state and local government are eligible to apply for CoC bonus, reallocation, and DV funding. Applicants do not need to currently receive CoC program funding in order to be eligible. Project applications must meet the eligible thresholds requirements outlined in the fiscal year 2022 CoC program competition, NOFO, page 48, and you can also see the CoC program interim rule. We'll discuss more about this later. Next slide, please. New project applications, eligible clients, and eligible clients to be served. Program participants must meet the HUD homeless definition, and program participants must also have a disabling condition. Next slide. So now we're going to talk about CoC bonus and reallocated funding. Next slide. So what projects are eligible? Please note the next few slides are specific to CoC bonus or reallocation funds. We will review DV project eligibility separately. Projects that are eligible this year for CoC bonus and reallocation funding are permanent supportive housing that is either dedicated plus or has 100% of beds dedicated to persons experiencing chronic homelessness. Permanent supportive housing is permanent housing with indefinite leasing or rental assistance paired with supportive services to assist homeless persons with a disability or families with an adult or a child member with a disability achieves housing stability. All dedicated plus projects have to serve at least in part households with children. A dedicated plus project targets serving people who are slightly less vulnerable than those defined as chronically homeless. For the more specific definition, please see the NOFO. As a reminder, if your CoC can show there are currently no chronic homeless persons in the community, as shown through the coordinated entry list, beds dedicated to those who are chronic homeless can be opened up to other homeless populations. Secondly, rapid rehousing projects serving persons who qualify as homeless under the CoC program interim rule. Rapid rehousing connects persons experiencing homelessness to permanent housing in the community through rental assistance and a tailored package of support services. Rapid rehousing, or RRH, emphasizes housing search and relocation services and short and medium-term rental assistance to move homeless persons and families with or without a disability as rapidly as possible into permanent housing. For category 1, these are folks who are unsheltered, so residing in a location not meant for human habitation, like under a bridge or in a car, or sheltered, which can include emergency shelters or hotels paid for by DSS, as well as those exiting an institution where they reside for less than 90 days and were homeless at entry. Category 2 includes those at imminent risk of losing their residence, so within 14 days. And category 4 covers those fleeing domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, etc. Third, joint transitional housing rapid rehousing projects serving persons who qualify as homeless under paragraphs in the CoC program interim rule. Joint component projects combine transitional housing and rapid rehousing into a single project. The goal of a joint TH-RRH project is to provide a safe space for people to stay, the transitional housing component, while providing financial assistance and wraparound support services to help people move into and stabilize in permanent housing, the rapid rehousing portion. Fourth, HMIS. This can only be applied for by the HMIS lead in the continuum. These funds and data management system required by HUD to collect the characteristics and service needs of people experiencing homelessness, as well as associated staffing. And finally, number 5, support services only for coordinated entry projects. Only one CE project can be applied for per CoC. These funds, coordination of the coordinated entry system, a required part of CoC infrastructure, and establish a community-wide referral or priority list of households for CoC-funded housing, prioritizing the most vulnerable. As a note, any youth serving provider may serve unaccompanied youth aged 24 and under, or families headed by youth aged 24 and under, who have an unsafe primary nighttime residence and no safe alternatives to that residence. Next slide, Jen. What is required of funded projects? All new projects are required to enter into the HMIS system. DV projects must enter into a system that is comparable to the HMIS system. All new projects must participate in the CoC's coordinated entry system. All new projects must follow a Housing First model. Housing First prioritizes rapid placement and stability in permanent housing without service requirements or preconditions to admission. All new project applicants must match all requested grant funds, except for leasing funds, with no less than 25% of funds or in-kind contributions to other sources, or from other sources, sorry. HUD will allow new projects to request 1 year of funding with a longer initial grant term not to exceed 18 months to allow for the additional time required to start up a program. HUD strongly encourages all rental assistance to begin within 12 months of the award. Next slide. HUD review project quality thresholds. All new projects must meet a specific quality threshold before HUD will consider the project for funding. Specifically, project applicants and subrecipients must demonstrate the financial and management capacity and experience to carry out the project and the capacity to administer federal funds. This includes satisfactory capacity, drawdowns, and performance for existing grants funded through the Shelter Plus Care or CoC programs. Project applicants must demonstrate they will be able to meet all timeliness standards per the interim rule or per 24 CFR 578.85, which includes things like approving activities and projects promptly, distributing funds to subrecipients within 45 days, and drawing down funds at least once a quarter. Next slide, please. Okay. New project applications. Responses should demonstrate that the type of housing proposed fits the needs of the program participants. The type of supportive services offered ensures successful retention or rapid placement in permanent housing and are provided in a way that fits participants' needs. The proposed project has a specific plan to coordinate and integrate with other mainstream health, social services, and employment programs, and that participants are assisted in obtaining benefits for which they may be eligible. The proposed project provides enough rapid rehousing assistance to ensure participants may move from transitional to permanent housing, joint TH and PHRRH. And coordinated entry and HMIS project quality thresholds can be found on page 51 of this year's NOFO. Next slide, please. So housing and healthcare commitments. HUD's priorities include leveraging agreements with housing and healthcare organizations. Agencies that have a written commitment from a housing and healthcare organization will be prioritized for funding. The commitment must include the name of the organization and the value of the commitment and the dates resources will be provided. Agreements must be submitted to CARES prior to September 15th. CARES will provide a template for agencies to use. Next slide, please. So funding criteria, CoC. Apart from project quality, the NOFO does not clearly outline the process by which HUD selects bonus projects for funding. We do know, however, how HUD determines funding for projects placed in Tier 2, and that all bonus projects are placed in Tier 2 in order to ensure an existing project that currently houses persons is not displaced by a new project. Tier 2 projects are scored on a 100-point scale. 50 points are directly related to the CoC scoring. 40 points are related to the project ranking. 50 points related to the commitment to follow a housing first approach. Remember, housing first is a model of housing assistance that prioritizes rapid placement and stabilization in permanent housing that does not have severe service participation requirements or preconditions. such as sobriety or minimum income threshold. Next slide, please. Now let's discuss DV bonus funding. Again, this year HUD has established a pool of funds for DV bonus projects. These projects are intended to assist survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Next slide. What projects are eligible for DV? Projects that are eligible this year for DV bonus funding are rapid rehousing, so permanent housing, rapid rehousing projects that demonstrate trauma-informed, victim-centered approaches. This has got to be a minimum of $50,000. 2, joint TH and PHRRH component projects that demonstrate trauma-informed, victim-centered approaches. Minimum of $50,000. Combines two single projects into one. Or an SSO project for coordinated entry to implement policies, procedures, and practices that equip the CoC's coordinated entry to better meet the needs of survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. These projects must implement policies, procedures, and practices that equip the CoC's coordinated entry to better meet the needs of people experiencing homelessness who are survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Next slide, please. Project quality thresholds for DV projects. These are also seen on slide 15. The project quality thresholds for DV projects are the same. Next slide. Funding criteria for DV housing programs. HUD utilizes the following criteria to review DV housing projects that are placed in Tier 2. So CoC score up to 50 points in direct proportion to the CoC's application. CoC collaboration with victim service providers up to 10 points in direct proportion to the score received on the following rating factors in the CoC application. The need for project, up to 10 points based on the extent the CoC is able to quantify the need for the project in its portfolio, the extent of the need and how the project will fill a gap. Quality of project applicant, up to 15 points based on the previous performance of the applicant in serving survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, and their ability to house survivors that meet safety outcomes. Demonstration of inclusion of victim-centered practices. Up to 8 points based on the quality of the project's plan to address the housing and safety needs of survivors by adopting victim-centered practices in operating their project. Full points will be awarded to project applicants that can demonstrate they are already adopting victim-centered practices. Demonstration of plan to include survivors with lived expertise. Up to 7 points based on the project's ability to demonstrate its plan to involve survivors in policies and program development throughout the project's operation. If a CoC applies for the DV bonus, HUD will award a point value to each project application. Additionally, points will be a combination of the CoC application score and the responses provided in the DV bonus specific questions in the consolidated application. Project scores will be based on a 100-point scale. Next slide. So for DVCE programs, CoC score up to 50 points in direct proportion to the CoC application. CoC collaboration with victim service providers up to 10 points. need for the project up to 25 points, demonstration of the plan to include survivors with lived expertise up to 15 points. Next slide. Now we're going to go on to talk about expansion projects. Next slide. Expansion is the process by which a renewal project applicant submits a new project or DV bonus application to expand its current operations by adding units, beds, persons served, services provided, and services provided to existing program participants, or HMIS/CE capacity. Expansion projects cannot replace other funding sources. Next slide, please. Expansion project applications may be submitted through bonus and/or reallocation or DV bonus funding and are subject to the eligible activities we discussed. The bulleted list are eligible projects through CoC bonus funding. DV bonus eligible projects differ slightly. Please refer to additional detail in the DV bonus webinar posted on the CARES website. Next slide, please. Project applicants requesting expansion funds must submit 2 project applications: the renewal project application to be expanded and a new project application with just the expansion information. Please note, this is in addition to submitting a rank and review new project application. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about submission process and deadlines. Next slide. Reminder, applying for new project DV bonus funding requires submitting 2 applications. You will apply through your CoC locally ranked rank and review application. Most of those emails, just as an FYI, went out yesterday with the applications attached to them. And then secondly, you're going to HUD's new project and DV bonus applications in eSNAPs will also need to be submitted. Next slide, please. Submission process and timeline. In terms of a process and timeline for submitting new project applications must be submitted both through the CoC's local rank and review process and through eSNAPs. Check your local CoC rank and review process to determine when new project applications are due to the rank and review committee. The rank and review process instructions, applications, and scoring tools for new projects are listed under your respective CoC on the CARES website. It is important to note that in many CoCs, these applications are due next week. The rank and review process is the process in which CoCs are required to score all renewal new DV project applications. Projects are then ranked from the highest to lowest score, resulting in the application's ranking. CoCs will use the ranking and funding allotted for new DV bonus projects to determine which applications will be included in the overall CoC application. All new project applications are ranked and will be listed on a separate CoC priority listing from the renewal project applications. All new project applications must be submitted in eSNAPs on or before August 24th. The August 24th deadline will apply even if the rank and review process has not yet determined if your project will move forward. Next slide, please. On the rank and review section of the CARES NY website, you will find the written process and all the documents that were used for this year's application process. Within this section, you will also find the new and DV bonus applications and submission due dates. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's next? If applying, please let CARE's lead staff person for your community know what you will be applying for, such as what project type, target population, and estimated amounts of funding to be requested. This will help us ensure the rank and review process is as efficient as possible. You will complete a new DV bonus rank and review application. You will begin collecting housing and healthcare commitment letters using a template to be provided by CARES. You will download the new project application detailed instructions for assistance with entering your project into eSnaps. And you will enter your projects into your project applications into eSnaps on or before August 24th. Next slide. Because the NOFA details a variety of important topics, CARES has produced a series of webinars to cover specific topics in more detail. Additional webinars include presentations on the NOFA summary, HUD priorities, and the consolidated application, what we're doing right now, the new project opportunities, DV bonus opportunity, opportunities for renewing projects, consolidation and transition grants, an eSnaps refresher, setting up a new renewal project, and an eSnaps refresher, setting up a new project. Please be sure to view these webinars on the NOFA section of the CARES website. Please also be sure to visit the NOFA page on the CARES website often for important application information and due dates. Next slide, please. Okay, so for any questions you might have, we do say please contact any member of the planning team with questions throughout, the NOFA timeline and processes that you're going to go through. So we will now begin the Q&A section. CARES staff will begin by restating questions that were put into the chat, and we will provide answers that were asked. Once those are complete, we will unmute everyone and then see if there's any additional questions that we may be able to answer. So now I'm going to bounce it over to you, Jen.
All right, awesome. So we did receive 2 questions in the chat. The first one was actually answered by a slide, but I think it might be helpful to ask anyhow. Do all new projects, not just DV, need the rank and review application and the eSnaps application?
Yes.
All right. And our second question is, what's the difference between this webinar and the one at 3 p.m. today?
So this webinar are for the CoCs that are not UFA, so Unified Funding Agencies. So this afternoon would be the Albany CoC, the Rockland CoC, the Franklin Essex CoC, and the Points North CoC. So all other CoCs should be here at this webinar.
Thanks, Sam. So that's actually all the questions that we received so far. If folks have further questions, please use the raise hand function so that we can unmute you.
Nothing coming in. So I do know, folks, that was a whole lot of listening to me speak. Again, these slides are going to be available on the website with the script. We'll answer any questions that you have and have a Q&A up there as well. And as you can see right on the slide, the last slide that you got, there's several people that you can reach out to for questions as you move forward. Thank you very much for attending today.
Thank you, everyone.